Hey, good evening, Facebook. Welcome to another episode of Post Daily Dose with me, your trusted parenting advisor, faithful guide and servant on the healing journey. What's my name? Big Papa Brian+Post. In today's episode, we are going to talk about Cyntoia Brown and how society continues to discount the impact of trauma. So I'm sure some of you have been following the story of this 30-year-old young lady who, when she was 16, she was committed to a 51-year sentence for committing a murder against a John, someone who had purchased her for sex. And she's been in prison since she was 16. She's now 30. And the governor of Tennessee has granted her clemency, because apparently, 51 years is far too long for someone who, he says has been reformed. So I woke up to, everyone posting about stuff like that. Hey, good morning, Heidi, or good afternoon, Heidi. Yes, you're on time. So I woke up this morning and everyone posting, and hey, Debbie, everyone posting about this and, very happy and celebrating. And of course, this young lady is very happy, and I can't even imagine actually, having been put in adult prison at the age of 16 and then having been there for the last 15 years. So what made me think about this particular situation is I see some of these situations from time to time, but I seem to be referencing Dr. Dorothy Ottenau Lewis a lot here in the last couple months. She's a psychiatrist at Bellevue Psychiatric Hospital in New York. And she is the author of a book called Guilty by Reason of Insanity. And essentially, Dr. Lewis studied some of our society's worst serial killers and psychopaths, Ted Bundy being one of them. Her self-professed claim to fame is that she was the last person to ever give Ted Bundy a hug. She had actually built a relationship with him, as much as one could, and gave him a hug before he was executed. So what is fascinating about the book, and it's a fantastic read, and it is actually written by a psychiatrist as well as a neuroscientist or Jonathan, I can't remember his last name, but he's a neuroscientist, and it is written in a remarkably easy to assimilate format. And so I highly suggest that it's Guilty by Reason of Insanity by Dorothy Ottenau Lewis. And what she contends after years and years of studying these serial killers and sociopaths and psychopaths is not a single one of them was absent a severe history of trauma. So all these individuals, just like the majority of individuals in prison right now, are victims of trauma at some point in their life. Some kind of, and you all know that my definition for trauma and scientific definition for trauma is any stressful event which is prolonged, overwhelming, and unpredictable. And many of these events facing these individuals happened as young children. Most of them probably from 0 to 5 within that time frame, because the brain is so rapidly developing during that stage. But it made me think of Cyntoia Brown and our society's reaction to this young lady being given clemency for her sentence, which is, it's great for her. But the focus becomes, number one, teenagers being sentenced to these lengthy sentences, but also being put into adult prisons. And number two, kind of the injustice, and we might even say the inhumaneness of putting children in these environments at these young ages for so long. And then you get the story, kind of the backstory of she ran away from an adoptive home. So it takes someone like me or an adoptive parent or someone familiar with adoption to start to kind of think about the influence of the backstory. So the news just picks up as, she ran away from her adoptive family when she was 14 or 15. She meets some pimp. He ends up pimping her out. She ends up, getting picked up by some guy at a Sonic. She agrees to have sex with him. some point during the rendezvous, they end up in bed. She thinks he's going for a gun. So the gun she has taken to rob him with at some point, and see, it's all kind of gets a little hazy. She ends up shooting him in the back of the head as they're in bed, and he reaches over to the nightstand. So she thinks he's going to get a gun. So she shoots him in the back of the head, then takes his money and takes his guns and leaves. And then obviously she gets caught, and then she's in prison. She gets sentenced to this long prison sentence. And then all of a sudden, Kim Kardashian West is involved, and Rihanna is involved, and they're sending messages to the governor of Tennessee, and they're advocating for this young lady. And the governor, decides to give her clemency after learning, about her story and the fact that she's almost to have a degree and she's gotten her GED while she's been in prison. And so she's going to get out in August, and probably there's going to be some celebration for her. And she probably may even get to go to Hollywood, and maybe someone will write a story of her, and, she'll probably make some money. And then when that 15 minutes of fame wears off and Hollywood is no longer fascinated with her story, then what's left? That's what we don't think about. And that is really the injustice that happens after the injustice that she has already experienced, which in some ways is probably no different than the injustice that she suffered, I imagine, in foster care. So I imagine she was a child, and perhaps this will come out at some point in time. I imagine she was a child who had frequent moves, was eventually adopted, and there was conflict in the adoptive family, which is very common with foster children, adopted children with serious trauma histories. So we don't know that backstory. No one's talking about that backstory. All they're doing is picking up from, here's how she got into prison, and now she's out. Praise God, hallelujah, which is all fantastic. Now let's hold her up as this beacon of, I'm not sure what. We've been putting teenagers, juveniles in adult prisons. There are probably thousands of juveniles in adult prisons right now to this day who have probably not even committed the level of crime that she committed. And so we hold her up as some beacon of something, some kind of social justice, which is really pretty distorted. Because if it wasn't for the kind of tension, the social tension that exists right now, I'm not sure that a case such as this would get the attention that it's getting. And so then what happens is this child, and I'm going to call her a child because what most of society doesn't realize is that she may be 30 years old, but she's every bit as emotionally regressed and stuck as she was when she went into prison. You don't grow past that. There's been probably no real healing. Probably actually one of the best things that's ever happened in this child's life is that she was in prison. And that may sound cold to some people at first when you first hear that, but the reality is a child who goes into foster care after being abused and neglected by their own family, typically they go through a lot. If they come into foster care, they're already stressed out, they're already traumatized, they're going to end up in multiple placements. They're going to get bounced around from home to home to home to home because child welfare can oftentimes be woefully ineffective in providing care for these children and effectively training foster parents. So eventually they get some adoptive parents who bring this child in for a short period of time, fall in love with her because she's attractive, she's probably charming, she's probably witty, she's probably very smart. They fall in love with her. The family comes together, and then she starts to get overwhelmed and stressed out by the family closeness. Her trauma starts to get triggered. Then she runs away. Or probably there's some therapy in there somewhere. Maybe there's some medications. Then she eventually runs away because the family blows up. Because again, adoptive families oftentimes are not even equipped and not educated to be able to truly work with traumatized children. And so then she ends up with a pimp who is, for the first time in her life, makes her feel loved and accepted and desired and wanted and important and precious. And then he starts to pimp her out, and she does what he wants her to do, because actually oxytocin is probably has been released, and there's probably some kind of attachment bond that's been formed between her and the pimp. So she does whatever he wants her to do, but she's also got this heightened fear reaction. She's got this exposure to being overwhelmed. She doesn't trust anyone. She probably certainly doesn't trust men, and so she's just walking around with post-traumatic stress disorder. Reminds me of that story of Eileen. I can't remember what the lady's last name, but Charlize Theron played her in a movie called Monster, and it was so interesting. One of the only men that she didn't actually murder was a man that was very kind and gentle to her and actually didn't trigger her and didn't threaten her. So then something happens with this child, and I just, these pieces kind of float together for me. Something happens with this young lady. She runs away, gets with the pimp, gets with this guy, shoots him in the back of the head, kills him, ends up in prison. Long story. Today, she's going to get pardoned and she's going to be out, and the fame's going to wear off. And now what's going to happen is she's going to try to put her life together. And there's going to have been very little real opportunity and real support around her for dealing with trauma. And the reason I talked about prison is because prison was probably the one place in her life after all of that. So after all of that drama, prison was probably the one place in her life that she's experienced that was consistent and predictable. Not a pretty place, not a place any of us want to be, but for children who've come through from her kind of life, it's one of the most predictable, consistent places that she may have ever even experienced. And she probably had loving relationships in there as well. And so now she's going to come out into the world, and she's going to get celebrated in a way that's going to be overwhelming. Kind of like a child who comes from an orphanage. We think that we bring them into our wonderful, loving homes, and actually we just bring them in environments where they're completely overwhelmed and stressed out, and it doesn't allow their brain an opportunity to heal. And a lot of times we're not able to put those pieces together. So she's going to get dropped into our society where we've completely discounted the reality of her life, because we've placed so much focus on social justice and children not being sentenced to adult prisons and things like that. We've completely missed the fact that she's still very much a child. She's still very much emotionally arrested. And when she gets really stressed out, when she gets really overwhelmed, who's she going to be able to turn to? Is she going to be able to turn to Kim Kardashian? Is she going to be able to turn to Rihanna? Is there going to be someone in her corner? Is she going to have some clinician that's going to be assigned to her to build a relationship with her and support her and help her work through her trauma and deal with her pain, and then be supportive for the next 15 years of her life? Because what she has experienced from probably the time she was conceived, up until this point, is buried in her brainstem. It's not going away. And she's going to have, she suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, without a doubt. And it's only going to take a certain level of stress for that to get turned on in the brainstem, and then she doesn't have society's attention on her anymore. Then what does she do? I've just seen this happen too many times. And I really want to just encourage you all. And again, I'm happy for the young lady to be given an opportunity to have a life outside of prison. But what I'm concerned about is society's reaction to it. How we just look at the surface. And it's like we put so much focus on the surface of things, and we don't dig down to the roots, to the surface, to really look at what is the pain that this young lady has gone through throughout her life, from conception up to this point, that even got her into that situation, and how can we help her heal from that? So that's all I wanted to say. That's all I wanted to share with you. I just want you to think about these stories moving forward, because there'll be more and more. Just don't get wrapped up in the social enamor of it all, because it is really not that lovely. It is great that individuals like this are able to get another chance, but equally there are individuals who never get that chance. And so when they get the chance, consider what's under the surface. Consider what's really at work for this young lady, and who is her foundation. Prison has been her foundation. Prison has helped her get her GED. Prison has helped her get her college degree. But all that's cognitive. None of that is dealing with the emotional. None of that is dealing with her trauma. So I just ask you all just to continue to look under the surface. Listen to behaviors, but respond to the individual, because the behaviors are just signals for what's underneath. Remember, in any given situation, we always have two choices. We can continue to react from stress and overwhelm, and we get caught up like sheeple. I have a friend who's always referring to sheeple mentality. And we can follow sheeple mentality, and we don't think, and we don't dig in, and we don't really ask the hard questions. And we just play the same game over and over and over again. And that's the fear and stress of our society. Or we can stop, we can take 3 to 10 deep breaths, we can slow down, we can really look at scenarios, we can choose love, and we can ask ourselves, what would love do in this situation? What would love do? What is real healing going to look at? We all have that ability. God bless you. I hope that when you lay your heads down tonight, please say a prayer for this young lady, Cyntoia Brown. Please say a prayer that when she lays her head down tonight, just like my prayer and my hope and my thoughts for you, is that when you close your eyes, the cells of your bodies will release all the stress from the generations of pain and trauma that you carry and that she carries. And then when she wakes up, she will feel refreshed, reinvigorated, re-energized, restored, and ready to face the day anew. God bless you. Big Papa loves you. We'll see you tomorrow.